Well, hello and welcome to our open house. My name is Mr. Griesby. I am the social science teacher or history teacher here at Johnson for 7th graders. What a wonderful year we've had. We've been able to dive into world history across the world, look at the different aspects of history through the 300s to the 1500s CE and all the different continents. We started first by looking at geography and just understanding the world as a whole and looking at the continents and the oceans. Spent some time looking at maps early on this year, and then we dived into our history. And we started off looking at medieval China, and we dove into learning about the different types of governments they had across the different dynasties, and we really dove into how the different governments, meritocracy, aristocracy, and governments by foreigners played a role in the life of the emperor, the nobles, the commoners, and the merchants and artisans found in China during the medieval time period. We talked about the building of the Great Wall, some of the important battles that they had, and also some of the important religious ideas and governmental ideas they had to show growth and understanding and moving forward in the early medieval ages. And then from China, we moved on to look at medieval Japan. And we learned and talked about the pros and cons of first being an island country and the importance of isolation in the beginning and how it helped them grow, but also how it allowed them to not further on exploration and understanding of new ideas because they were isolated. And so we took a look at that. We also dove into who Prince Shotoku was and the importance he played in bringing in new ideas from foreign countries and helping Japan grow out of its isolationism into a young world power and how they wanted to rival Japan or China. And so we looked at that aspect of Japan. We also then began to talk about the samurai and the way of the warrior, or the Bushido Code. And we had students kind of analyze the Bushido Code and take part in what they thought they best represented. We had students talk about just the different ideals of the Bushido Code, what they thought should be left out, what should be added, and again, what they thought they best represented. From learning about medieval Japan, we went across the Pacific Ocean and started learning about some of the early civilizations in the Americas. We talked about the Mayans in central and southeastern Mexico. We talked about the Mayan civilization and how some of its early beliefs and practices played a role in the growth of Mexico and other Central American countries. We began to look at their artifacts and paintings and some of the things that they did. And then we moved on and talked about the Aztecs. And we talked about the importance of daily life for the Aztecs. We talked about class structure and marriage, along with family life, religion, and then all the things they did for recreation and games, and also the way of the warrior for them in warfare. And so we looked at these different aspects of the Aztecs as well. And actually we had I had my students this year write a paper, and they had to analyze the different aspects of daily life, and they got to choose what they thought were the most important to the Aztecs. And so they wrote a paper explaining which aspects of daily life they thought were the most important. From the Aztecs, we moved on into medieval Europe, and we took a look at medieval Europe. We first started though with the fall of Rome in the West, and we talked about just the growth of feudalism and how that came from it. People were afraid of being attacked by different groups like the Vikings in medieval Europe, and so the formulation of feudalism took place. And so we began to analyze and look at feudalism and the role of the king or emperor, along with the nobility, and then the commoners, the serfs and the peasants, and just how loyalty and service played a huge role in feudalism. So we took a look at that. We looked at the knights as well. We also looked at some early battles that took place and what it meant, what the code of chivalry was. And then we began to talk about the Byzantine Empire, On the other side of the Roman Empire, right, in the East, in Eastern Europe, the Byzantine Empire, right, was a lasting continuation of the Western Empire, the Western Roman Empire, and they lasted almost 1,000 years longer after the West. And so we looked at the Byzantine Empire and Emperor Justinian and Constantine and the roles they played in the growth of Eastern Europe. And so, and just how they expanded trade throughout Asia and Northern Africa. The growth of religion and the power of the church in Europe in general were some topics that we talked about this year when we looked at Europe and especially the Byzantine Empire. And then lastly, we began to talk about the decline of feudalism, how the Black Plague or the Black Death played a huge role in the decline of feudalism. We talked about how political changes also played a role in feudalism following the growth and understanding of and movement of people. We looked at the growth of religion and the reformation between the churches and how that played a role in kind of bringing us into our daily life even today, and just the aspect of how the treatment of people plays a huge role of life. We looked at then, and what we're going to be looking at is the age of exploration. And that's something we're going to finish with, is the Renaissance and age of exploration. So we'll be getting to that shortly. But that is an overview of what we have studied in 7th grade world history during the medieval age. Thank you guys so much for being able to view this. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Have a great day, and let's go Warriors.